Hi, folks. Just to say before we get into a great episode with Carrsan, friend of the podcast and former guest Richard Waters' new movie Distort 2 Dead Among the Trees is available to watch on watch.fantv.com. You can watch it for free with ads, or you can sign up for a package and watch it without ads. I have a small cameo in it, and you can watch the original film there as well. So you can check out the link in the description of this episode. Hello and welcome to the 9th episode of The Horror with Patrizia Dahlia Thompson. And I am joined by Carrsan T. Morrissey. Welcome to the show, Carrsan. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
I'm very delighted to have you on. I mean, what I think is cool is that, I've had, obviously Louise Ward on here. On this episode, I feel like I'm talking to someone whose work is still kind of really bubbling under and hasn't yet ascended into the kind of the trans femme genre canon so much.
God willing someday, but right now I'm also I'm kind of enjoying the underground thing at the moment. So
Hell yeah. So I actually discovered you because I ended up to kind of just scrolling through Letterboxd. I heard about Marcus Koch's movie Rot,
Mhm.
and then I saw that you were one of the reviews that was on there. And I think honestly it was the case that I saw you had the trans flag in your bio and then went and was like, there is another T-girl who's obsessed with this sick or interested in this sick movie. I think you'd seen it at a curated screening or something, but I just watched it on YouTube. I will say, if anyone who hasn't seen it, if you like kind of like a punk rock necromantic riff where someone wears a skinny puppy t-shirt, which is always going to be of interest to me,
Mhm.
uh, then it's worth checking out. But I was interested, and then through looking at your letterbox, it was a case that I wanted to kind of seek out your work and thought you were interesting. Also, I have joked to a few of my girlfriends that you do seem to be like the transatlantic version of me because we both have blue hair. Mine is
I
less
know.
in the same kind of flick. And I showed one of my girlfriends a picture of you when you were doing a presentation somewhere and you were wearing a possession t-shirt. And that's
Which
lit.
I am
Yeah, I'm
today,
wearing
in fact.
a Japanese one that my friend Dom got me a few
Oh, that's
years.
fucking dope, actually. Oh my God, I love that.
It's not a Japanese company, but it's like they do yeah, they did like a few Japanese type versions of movie posters. But yeah, I checked out your work then eventually. Today I watched Bleeders and I watched The Savages. But would you like to introduce yourself first? Well, introduce yourself and your work because you've directed a few features, you've directed a load of shorts, and you also have a novel that you wrote as well.
Yeah, so my name is Carrsan T. Morrissey. I live in Cedar Falls, Iowa, in the United States. Iowa is a pretty rural state, but it's kind of a weird little mix of tiny little cities and towns just surrounded by cornfields. But it's a nice place. Very conservative state, but with
Yeah.
pockets of sanity here and there. And also just kind of a fun place to make horror because it's sort of the big wide open area that inspires
Cool.
me. I've been making movies since I was in sixth grade-ish. It's just sort of been my passion my entire life. I remember I listened to your last interview with Louise, and you talked about filmmaking as a compulsion. And I completely feel that because it is just once I figured out it was something I could do and something I enjoyed, I just haven't been able to stop doing it, and nor would I want to. But it's my favorite thing. And I'm transgender. I came out publicly a couple of years back, but have been slowly on my gender journey really since I was in my early 20s. And, making movies as a trans femme filmmaker in Iowa in the United States right now is definitely an interesting thing.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where I didn't get into filmmaking to make I guess you would say political or social films. But now the art has become so inherently that it's become just part of what I enjoy because I am a person who's very into social justice and all of those things. And so even though my movies are really fucked up and depressing and often just feature terrible people doing terrible things, it's still kind of cool to highlight my community and the people in it and the cool artists that are around doing this kind of fucked up stuff. But I love extreme horror. I love like exploitation films, Grindhouse, that sort of thing. That's sort of what I came up on. And in particular, obviously queer horror, because I just think queer people make the coolest horror films a lot of the time. Um,
Absolutely agreed. Yeah,
yeah.
100%, of course. I mean, what about kind of like I've seen a bit in kind of your work of like, and this is obviously like because of my kind of interest or like my taste for that kind of cinema. I see a little bit of kind of like Gaspar Noé, of
Mm.
like
Hmm.
the new French extremity, a little bit of
Yes.
kind of definitely, I think, any kind of like somebody working in transgressive queer art is also gonna, kind of have the spirit of like Gregor Araki and
Hmm.
people like that as well. But it's funny because you touched upon, you mentioned about what it's like to be a trans filmmaker making movies in Iowa right now, and like it's a case of glad you said it because like I currently, as much as I would love to, I'm not entering the United States for at least
Hmm.
the next few years because I refuse to say that I'm a man in order to go, even though my passport says F, I refuse to go through the security
No.
I find it extremely frightening, but I think an interesting thing, and I watched The Salvages today and I watched Bleeders, I loved both of them. But what I think is
Thank you.
interesting about your work is and something that we can talk about in general is I think that like pressing queer art sates me right now.
Hmm.
And I think that obviously I'm a huge lover of Louise's work, but also, I just finished
Same.
Aoife Josie Clement's book, Persona. I don't know if you've read that,
I
but
haven't. I ordered a copy, and as soon as I get it, I'm going to because I love her work as well. But yeah, I mean, Louise is literally one of my biggest idols right now. I think that her work is fucking amazing, and everything that that whole group is doing is just like mind-blowing work
oh, it's
and
incredible.
so essential. Like just it's so fucking brilliant. I never thought I'd see a movie like Castration movie in a theater, and
Nor
it
did
just
I.
yeah, it lit a fire under my ass to be like, okay, well, like
Oh, hell
if
yeah.
other people are doing this, I can do this. Like
Have
this
you
kind of work, you know?
Yeah, have you submitted your work or been in contact with the Trans Experience Festival that has been going for 2 years in Dublin?
I have not. I just heard about it for the first time,
Yeah,
actually.
Louise was here and Aoife as well, and you shout out Louise and Aoife and Milo and Henry from who made Puppy Girl. Like, it was a really amazing time, and it was like it just felt like on the Sunday night, it was like I said to Louise, I was like, "Oh, it feels like the end of summer camp, like saying goodbye to my friends that I made this weekend." And it's what you said, like the castration movie films have led me down to finding the other directors who have been involved as actors, like Avalon Fast movie, Honeycomb, and
Hmm.
her new movie Camp, and then her new movie Drinking and Driving I haven't seen yet. But there's like Evelyn, Vera, and Alice, and just so many other like just great filmmakers who are involved as actors that get involved in the project. It's really kind of been like a great kind of way to point me towards different kind of sections of the underground that I hadn't engaged with yet.
I was just gonna say, kind of going back to something you mentioned earlier about like my films and French New Extremity. Like I definitely consider myself a student of French New Extremity generally. Like that was
Hmm.
sort of the genre that I first watched that got me interested in extreme horror. It's sort of the aesthetic I find myself coming back to. So like Gaspar Noé, and also like films like Martyrs, in Interior, all the High Tension, all of them. So a little bit of Lars von Trier, even though he's a bastard, but like his camera work still speaks to me a lot. But I do think that's the thing with this like trans underground movement that's happening right now is that like it's this new extreme, not even necessarily extreme horror, but certainly extreme cinema movement. And it's just such a fucking cool time to be alive and to see this and to be like, oh
Yes.
shit, like we're taking this kind of traditionally almost hyper masculine genre and completely turning it on its head. And there's a lot of like cis women filmmakers that are doing really cool shit right now too.
Yeah.
It's just such an interesting phenomenon that is just been so cool to see.
I came away from 2 weekends ago and I said like trans pervert cinema is in good health. Like I
Yeah.
saw for like to see over the festival weekend so many five-star bangers is just unreal. And like there was a short, like I can't remember the name of the director right now, but like I Can Be Killed, which is like a trans mask version of like American Guinea Pig
Oh
or
fuck.
yeah, like stuff that's really incredible. And like for me, it's been so cool because the main things I've written about are extreme horror and trans cinema as much as and a few years ago it felt like trans cinema, what is it? And now it's like we can still argue the semantics of what is a trans film and maybe trying to categorize trans cinema, you know, you risk flattening things or it risks being kind of reductive to do that. But at the
Mm,
same time, for argument's sake, if we take a notion of a trans cinema, the fact that that is something that's so vibrant now, and also I'm seeing like great stuff, trans masculine filmmakers, non-binary, like you know, all of
hmm
this. But what I love about your work is, and it's you know, I can compare this with like writers like Gretchen Falcon Martin or Alison Rumfitt, people like that as well. But like there is a bleakness to them, but like in The Savages in particular, so The Savages is Carrsan's movie that's a sapphic religious rape revenge epic against the background of the apocalypse. So of course I was gonna love it. But what I find kind of inspiring about a lot of these works is this feeling of like is this feeling of resilience, this feeling of like
mm.
and in The Savages it's like you wish in some ways that you had met this person you fall in love with in not the end of the world. But that's what trans love feels. And I know in that
Yeah,
film it's two cis girls, but that's what trans and queer love feels like right now. Is like you know loving people while the world is on fire, and
100%.
clutching people because it's so important to you. And so it's like that's why with your work it's grim, but there's something that I feel is really positive to that. And it's like the scene in the first castration movie where Aoife's character Adeline is on the phone to Traps.
Yeah.
And I think that scene's key to me because it's like she says to Adeline, she's like, you know, we just keep going. Like this is what queer people do. And I think
hmm
that's a really kind of inspiring thing.
Agreed. Yeah, and like, it was the same with Bleeders, where like even though Iris is a character who's obviously very morally dubious, it's like she's still a survivor. And it's not really about whether she's a good person or a bad person. It's just about like this is what this person needs to do to keep living.
Yeah,
And that's I'm more interested in that than like morality plays. There's a lot of queer media out there, and not and this is not meant to be shady because there's a lot of great queer media like this, but like there is a lot of queer media that shows us at our best and kind of angelizes us and like, oh, we're so inspiring, and like that's great. But I do think that we deserve complex stories too. We deserve stories about
100%.
just like real shit and real people and what it's like on the ground in the dirt and in the margins. And that's always been more interesting to me, regardless of who the story is about. But especially with what I'm writing and for queer people, that's just what interests me.
So with Bleeders, I really loved it. Was it at all influenced by kind of like I saw a bit of Joe Bigos's Bliss in there? Obviously, there's things as well like the addiction that
hmm
have used kind of vampirism as a. I don't even think it's a metaphor for addiction in this case. It
Yeah,
more
it's
is the pri
literally vampirism is addiction. Bliss was definitely one of the influences. There was a lot. It's sort of a pastiche of a lot of things that I've seen in the last 5 years that I loved. But yeah, Bliss and obviously a bit of castration movie and Neon Demon a little bit with like some of the
Oh hell
club
yeah,
scenes.
yeah,
Even that kind of like just kind of a cold new French extremity feel to some of the
yeah.
scenes in Iris's apartment. It's sort of a movie that I made to try to capture a really specific aesthetic,
Hmm.
which I'm really proud of. Because like we're shooting in like just like a town where people live, and it's this nice little college town. So it's like I had to find all the like most derelict looking outdoor spaces to kind of get this like industrial apocalyptic vibe that we went for. And thankfully it was really cold, so we had all the like big steamy pipes and all the cool shit that makes it look
No,
extra
yeah.
grimy. But yeah, there were a lot of things that really influenced the visuals of that movie.
It felt that the kind of like opening extended sequence of I'm terrible with character names, but I forget the main character's name in that film.
Iris is,
Uh,
is her name, yeah.
Iris, yeah. The extended sequence of her kind of like on her bed starting to fiend for blood and wanting to bite herself. It reminded me of like the long takes in Castration movie where you see Traps go to the toilet, shoot estrogen. Like it gave me that kind of vibe. But what I loved about it is that one of the things I love in films is when like it dunks you into a world kind of in media res and doesn't over explain or it's just kind of like a slice of life of like you are in
Mhm.
this moment. But it also felt like the world was like so well defined conceptually. Like, is the idea that you would want to do more stuff in this world? I'm not even saying expand
Oh
the
yeah.
short, but yeah.
Yeah, I actually do that with a lot of my work. Not enough of it is really public yet to be super obvious, which is something I'm working on. But I do tend to I kind of have three current different little mythos worlds, if you will, that I sort of write in, where there's kind of the Skyquake apocalypse thing with like the salvages and some other films I've made, like The Tower. Bleeders and my other short film of the Flesh sort of take place in this like vampire apocalypse bad vibe. Oh, and Conqueror Worm, which is another one that I made. So yeah, rather than like another sequel to Bleeders, I think it'll be more of like an expansion on the world it takes place in. Because I don't really like to hold myself too hard to any particular storyline or canon. It's more like each new project sort of takes what was good about the old one and then builds off of that. So.
Hell yeah. Can I ask, by the way, and I make up, but the guy, the dealer who she sleeps with,
Oh, yeah, my friend Mickey, yeah.
is he
Plays
trans?
Cassius. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, just absolute T-boy fuckboy vibes, immaculate. I was
He
like,
did. We
I
joked about a lot actually finding his character, because he's a fucking phenomenal actor. Also a great filmmaker. He's working on some things right now that are
was
going to be
sick.
really cool trans cinema. And we did think about his character because even I remember he called me earlier on, like when he first got the script, and kind of asked like if I pictured the character coming across more as a trans guy or just as like just a cis just guy. And I
Yeah.
said like I wanted to lean into the transness of this movie because really every character that speaks, I think, with a couple of small exceptions, is a trans person or at least a queer person.
Right.
So, I didn't want to shy away from that. And, like if you look, there's testosterone on the desk with the bottles of Iker and the weed and all the other shit that's in. Like he dressed that whole room. It's kind of a shame you don't see all of it in the movie, but it just didn't work with the flow of it. But like he really did a great job set designing that room to seem like somebody who maybe has their shit a little bit more together than Iris does, but is also
Yeah.
still just kind of in the dirt with everybody else in this particular fucked up world. But yeah, he's fantastic.
Oh, amazing. So Iker in the world of the film is a drug that satiates the addiction to blood or
My idea is that Iker causes the addiction to blood, that it's basically
okay.
like a party drug that gives you like euphoria as well as other sort of like implied benefits like maybe strength or longer life or beauty or however you want to see it. But it's
Yeah.
also slowly poisoning them, which means they need to be constantly replacing their blood supply and they basically become vampires. So the whole sort of bit was that I wanted to make a vampire movie where there's no real benefit to being a vampire. It just sort of happens to you, and it's also just
Yeah.
a result of the world they're living in. So,
I what I love
like even like
about
Kronos is another one I thought of, where like the vampires on the ground in the bathroom licking blood off the floor. Like there's nothing glamorous about it.
yeah,
And
I actually Kronos is one of my blind spots that's playing here in Dublin soon, so I need to check it out. But
oh, it's great.
when we talk about, I what I like about the film as well is that like, there's the doll patch on her jacket, which is awesome.
Uh-huh.
But like it is characters who are trans or who are played
Hmm.
by trans actors. There's not, and then it's like what I like is the versatility. Like someone was asking me recently about Tide and was like, well, to qualify as a trans film, does something have to have trans characters? I was like, no, like there was like I think there was some animations there that were by trans girls, but like you wouldn't there was nothing explicitly trans about the characters in them, and I think it's good to see like just good genre, extreme genre cinema that happens to have us. And I mean, first of all, like what is the experience like? I mean, it's a big question, but like what is the experience like of living trans in a state like Iowa right now?
I will say that in general, I've been very privileged in that, at least within the film community, especially here, like I'm pretty well known and don't really run into anybody that has like an issue with that aspect of me. I I go to a lot of film festivals and get a lot of, "Hey dude, love your movies," but like it's not like people trying to be assholes. It's just people that
Yeah.
don't know me very well or don't understand.
Yeah.
But, it's more of just the sort of miasma of dread over, you know, the trans community. Like in Iowa, in particular, last year it was the first state in the United States to remove specifically a group from their civil rights laws because they stripped away the trans specific civil rights from their laws in Iowa. So like, it's like we're all just kind of sitting around having a good time and waiting for the bomb to go off is how it feels right now.
Yeah, which is
Like
very,
there's
very much the feeling of the salvages. I mean, was that
yeah,
present when you were making that, or had that kind of moment yet to arrive?
it certainly it was already in the, like the first Trump era had already happened by then. And obviously the evils of the United States did not start with Donald Trump by any stretch of the
No.
imagination. But, you know, I've always been fascinated by the apocalypse and by apocalyptic stories, especially like apocalypse almost in terms of like societal collapse as well as like global apocalypse. It's always been interesting to me. It's just that now it's become more relevant and personal
Mm,
since, I have a lot of friends and myself who are very scared of what's going on right now. And sort of being constantly told that like, oh, everything's fine, don't be over dramatic, nothing's actually going to happen to you. And yet we're all just sort of watching the news as these things just slowly start to happen all over the country. And like they're making a public list of all trans people, I think in like, I don't remember what state, Tennessee or something like that. Like it's
yeah.
nasty. It's
No,
just
I
this,
mean,
it's just dread. It's just kind of this little underlying dread that we're all living with right now
mhm.
that is tiring.
I used to live in London and then moved back to Dublin in 2024, and then in 2025 the UK government, the Supreme Court said that
Hmm.
trans women aren't women. I was at the first big protest because I happened to be in London at that time,
Yeah.
and that feeling you said of you didn't you intended to make genre movies, and this feeling of like I didn't originally intend for my stop me by the way if you feel like I'm mischaracterizing what you said, but
No.
you didn't necessarily intend for your work originally to be political. It's I do feel the resentment sometimes of I think it's about a good thing that like being trans politicized me to a huge degree in terms of getting actually involved in activism. It like actively politicized me, and I think that's a better thing. And like shout out to like all the trans people of color at the minute, like me and Carson. I'm not We have to acknowledge like we have the benefits,
Oh, 100%. And like,
you
especially
know.
in Iowa, I'm fully aware that blue hair and all, there are still a lot of people that are just going to perceive me as a white man with blue hair and a punk aesthetic, which like gets you judgment, but is a safer thing to pass as. So
Yeah.
there's still privilege, absolutely. And that's the thing too, is like, how can I use that to
Oh yeah.
help our agenda and to help push us into the public eye? And you know, not to use, I know agenda is such a loaded word, but like if our agenda is survival and acceptance, then
Yes.
that's
Yeah.
still an
Yeah.
agenda. Like,
No. Maybe, yeah, maybe not die, but like I feel that I feel a little bit of that sometimes, but also like as a trans woman writing, in the and podcasting in the extreme horror space, it's like, well, I am different to the majority of. I don't think the fans, because I think it's just a case that there's the more in the fandom that the loudest voices have been men, rather than
Mhm.
them actually representing a majority of fandom. I think it's just that the women and femme voices are being empowered now.
Mhm.
But my kind of thing is like I just feel like I am going to acknowledge being a trans woman, and I am going to be acknowledged like that this is an independent trans owned podcast. Like I'm not doing this with any network or with any kind of backing. And like I just think it would
Yeah.
be unrealistic to suggest it's anything other than that. And sometimes what I talk about will inform, sometimes when I write in my writing or my podcasting, sometimes I will directly talk about my experience of transness, and sometimes I won't, but it's still a trans person's perspective.
You know,
Freaking talking about Blair Witch or Book of Shadows, Blair Witch 2
yeah.
is as important a tapestry of me, part of the tapestry of me as, any, castration movie and these other things.
Absolutely. And like that is the other side of it is like it's not all dread, obviously. Like there is sort of a galvanizing righteous hope that comes with all of this too.
Hmm.
Of, like, okay, well then I guess our community's got to just be strong like we always have been. and survive like we always have and always will.
Yeah,
So,
I think in this moment as well, it's just like reinforced for me, but like now is not the time for, if I feel like for me, embracing kind of cinema that is like pervert cinema has been
mhm.
a part of like, people are going to call me a pervert anyway, and a
Oh,
groomer.
100%.
So like, it's allowed me to escape from like this feeling of, from respectability politics to a huge degree.
Yeah, like I'm as normal as I could pretend my tastes are. I'm a polyamorous blue-haired trans woman in the Midwest in the United States. Like I may as well just be loud and proud about the weird shit that I enjoy watching and making anyway, since, you know,
100%.
fuck it. Like they're gonna say what they're gonna say regardless. I may as well just lean into it and make cool shit. Like,
Yeah, so I mean, we've talked for half an hour, such is the amount that we
yes.
we can talk about this stuff. But when bringing up the topic of today, possession, it's worth saying like Possession is a movie that I showed you my Possession tattoo. I literally have tattooed on
Mhm.
my skin. It's a huge film for me. It's in the same way as Castration Movie Anthology 2, Best of Both Worlds has this aspect as well, where it's so dense and in many ways hard to read that it just provides me with the ability to always go back to it. And because it's so hard to get a handle on, like the Best of Both Worlds, it's a film that I had seen several times and still excited me. And that's
So
what's go
So I
on.
was going
Yeah,
to say, full disclosure, I haven't actually seen Best of Both Worlds yet because I've been stubbornly holding out to see it in a movie theater. So
fair
I'm
enough.
finally seeing it in June.
I will I will
But
attempt not to I will attempt not to spoil as much as possible.
I
I
forgive
also
you in advance, but I appreciate it.
I also saw the latest chapter, and it
Mhm.
was A, incredible, and B, I hated it because so much of the experience of the things in it were verbatim from my life that I was like, wow, it's like
Oh
a
yeah.
film. But also to see that on screen is incredible. But yeah, with Possession, this is a movie that like shout out like the people who have like made this film their life's work, like Daniel Burlard and
Oh yeah.
Alexandra Heller Nicholas. Like, did you get the second sight box set that came out before Christmas?
I did not. No, I don't own it
Okay.
physically yet. I need to, but like, you
I
know,
bought this because this was going to
oh,
go for
gorgeous.
silly money online. I knew it was, and it already is, but it's got, yeah, I'm not gonna like just gloat. Like,
No, it's
I'm
okay.
not
I
gonna
am crazy fucking jealous. It looks incredible.
not gonna
Um,
physical media mog you, as the kids might
It's
say.
okay. I'll go get my box from the basement and we'll go through our list of weird movies that we own later.
But
But
there,
no, like I was just gonna say, like when you asked earlier about like influences on my work, like I didn't bring up Possession because I knew we were gonna talk about it. But like if you ask about anything that I made was Possession and an influence on it, yes. Like this movie, the first time I saw it, it was just like a visual revelation of like this is what I've wanted my shit to look like and to feel
wow,
like. Obviously it has very particular themes, but like just the aesthetics of this movie, the extremity, the I don't even want to say borderline camp, the camp, but the really
oh yeah,
depressing dark camp of it is just it just speaks to my soul. So like it's one of my go-to movies that like if people who are going to be in one of my projects ask like what should I watch to prepare for this? Possession. Doesn't even really matter what the movie's actually going to be about, but Possession is one that is just so essential to me.
and clearly it's not just you. It's
No,
every
no.
director of a quote unquote elevated horror in the last 10 years has clearly been showing their actors Possession because so many of the performances in those films, they are doing the Isabella Gianni in Possession. It's so clear. But
Hmm.
to say like this movie is like such a favorite of mine that I have not directly dealt with it in either writing in any long form way. I've referenced it in relation to things. I've referenced it in relation to Best of Both Worlds, in fact, and
Hmm.
I'll explain why. But I invoked it, but I've never written something long form about it, and I've not talked about it on a podcast. And I think the reason is because it's something that I love so much. It's so intimidating to talk about, and it's like to nail down, my thoughts and my feelings and what I think this movie might mean into something, into, one piece felt so intimidating. And also because, like I said, like people have written books, people, I may
Oh
have
yeah.
this on my flesh, but there are people who've dedicated their life to this more than I. So, with that in mind, I will preface this with by saying that I reserve the right to come back to talking about Possession. I am not going to try and make this episode my definitive statement on Possession. I might spend my entire, you know, parallel career talking about Possession, but also Margaret Qualley, the fucking nerve. I loved The Substance, but
Oh,
Margaret Qualley, bitch, you have not earned what Isabella Johnny did. You do not get to step into those shoes.
I was, I was gonna wait to talk about the remake, but I have opinions. I will say I did joke. I just actually watched Possession recently about a month ago with my friend Mary, and we have come to the determination that if they cast Sam Elliott to play Heinrich, I will see
That
it.
would be
Uh,
incredible.
that's the only weird thing they could do where I'd be like, all right, whatever. But I don't know. I just don't. This movie feels unremakeable to me because
100%.
it's so deliberate in its themes, in the West Berlin of it all, the divorce that the director was going through when he wrote it. It's so of its time and of this one person and the people that made it. To remake it feels pointless. Like I don't understand it. And I'm usually not that picky about remakes, but it's such a singular piece that I just don't understand the appeal of trying to do it again.
100%. I think with some of the remakes that happened in the 2000s in the remake cycle, you can clearly go like, okay, that's an exploitable premise that you
Hmm.
can put something you can do again. But it felt to me like, and I actually liked Luca Guadagnino's remake of Furia quite a
Oh,
lot.
totally.
But
But
but before it came
yeah,
out, I was like, why do you remake Suspiria? You can't have the same feeling as Suspiria. And with Possession, it's so much like you said of the time, and it's such a unique atmosphere. Well, such a unique timbre to the both the movie and the performances. But what I wanted to ask was like, what is your experience with this movie? Like, when was the first time you saw it, and kind of how what is your journey with the film been like? Because I've quite a long one.
yeah. So the first time I watched it, I don't remember exactly when my first watch was, especially because like it's one that I had already kind of been orbiting for a long time before I actually sat down and watched it. But I want to say it was around like 5 years ago. Like it was a little later into my kind of already loving extreme horror era. But it was just one that I sat down, I watched it by myself for the first time I ever watched it. And I was just in awe because I saw so much of what I've been trying to accomplish as a filmmaker. Even, not like literally, but just in this sort of metaphysical sense of like, this is how I want a movie I make to feel. And I also just found it so horrifying. Like it's such a amazing portrayal of like this just caustic, awful, codependent relationship between
Mhm.
these two people and the like apocalyptic consequences of it that it just moved me, as well as just the surrealistic elements, the creature, which we can get more into later, the
Yeah, of course.
ending, it just spoke to me. And I always, it's one that I've ever since I watched it and have rewatched it and rewatched it and rewatched it since. Every time I'm writing a script, I think about Possession. Every time I'm watching a horror movie that I really love, I think about Possession because to me, it's one of the, again, it's one of the best examples of just a completely singular original work that I don't think anybody else could have made exactly the way that it is. It's so surreal and odd, but it
There is
works. Like,
there is a term that was used once for the work of the director Chris Cunningham, and it was that I think it was Mark Romanek said that he creates a hermetically sealed universe, and
yes.
Possession is 100% a hermetically sealed universe. At the one hand, the performances are and the way in which people talk have this timbre that's like if aliens came down from space and made a film about how they think humans act. There's
Hmm.
something that is so heightened about it, but at the same time, it reveals something so intense and raw that's at the truth of humanity. You know, Ajani, after the movie was made, she said in her Palme d'Or speech, she said that she called it emotional pornography because she said like Zulewski and like you can debate the ethics of like him pushing actors to this state and in particular women. She said that Zulewski captured a piece of her soul on camera and that like in some way this was she didn't consent to this, but that it describes the rawness of what there's so many. I was like when I have 2 pages of notes from when I was watching the film this afternoon, and like there was just so many moments where I wanted to like I was like, oh, that's incredible. Like she is so good. But I go into that. I'll just talk about like my kind of history with the film, and I think like The reappraisal it's got in the last few years. So like I first watched this into 2021, like yourself. I can't claim to have been, on the possession train for years and years and years. I watched it in 2021
Mhm.
at the Prince Charles Cinema in London, which is like a great repertory and also a new movie cinema. If you ever get a chance, I totally urge you to go there. It's incredible.
Yeah.
But I saw it and I thought it was amazing. But I think my letterbox review the first time was, "Is this dying? Is this what being dead feels like?" Because it was the utter shock of like I knew it was incredible, but like I didn't know what to make of it. And it was at the time where this wasn't available on streaming. The physical copies were incredibly expensive, and it had this aura, this mystique about it before I went into it. The second time I saw it was also on the big screen. It was at the BFI South Bank, and it was when. Are you familiar with Kier Janice's book House of Psychotic Women, which I have under my coffee table?
I have not read it yet, but I am familiar with the book.
It was an event for the new edition of House of Psychotic Women, and she was there and she screened Possession.
Mm.
And in the intervening year, I had gone through the end of a 7-year relationship where I was engaged. And let me tell you, the film hits a lot fucking different when you've
Oh
gone
yeah.
through not a divorce, but a long-term breakup.
It
Um,
is the breakup movie in my opinion. Like it
100%.
truly is.
Like that and The Brood. They're such
Yeah.
divorce movies. So like for context, Zulewski made this film because he had A, gone through a divorce, and B, he was living in exile because his movie The Silver Globe had been shut down by the Polish authorities because despite being a sci-fi movie, he was using that as a metaphor for criticisms about the government and about Poland. So
Hmm.
it has that, and what I think is interesting as well is that it's very much a movie about immigrants. It might be set in Berlin, but it's Mark and Anna are both. Anna's French. Mark is, I presume, from New Zealand, but it's not really established. But even like their friends all speak English, and even Margie has like a German surname, but she seems to speak with a very English accent. And I think
Hmm.
like that's key to the sense of displacement that's in the film. Is like I think that is a part of like showing that these characters don't have roots, aren't tethered to the place in a very kind of like rigid way, I think. But like over the years, I've rewatched it and it's just clicked with me. And I think like I mean, when I first started estrogen, the first week that I was on estrogen, I put up a picture. I one day was watching TV and something like fairly innocuous, but like meant to be emotional, fairly innocuous happened on TV, and I started crying, and I
Hmm.
couldn't stop
That's so
crying,
real.
and yeah, and the next day I was like, I put up a picture of a Johnny screaming in the subway and was like, how it feels to start estrogen. Like it,
Literally.
and the thing is like in the last few years, the movie has definitely blown up. It's now available on, I don't know what it's like in the US, but here it's available on Prime and there's been new
Yeah,
editions of it. Like
same. I watched it on Shudder today, but it is on Prime and other things like that as well.
amazing. But like yeah, I mean it's also before we start recording, I kind of joked I wanted to talk about like its status now, the way in which I engage with stuff about possession often is like, memes about trans girl comfort movies and like fan cams of her, of Ajani to like Molchat Dama. Like, yeah, have you kind of like experienced that too? Like, I feel like I've been talking for a minute, which I can
No,
do,
you're
but I
fine.
wanted you speak to that. Yeah.
Yeah, like I think that certainly I've experienced it as a queer comfort movie, but also just very much as a feminine comfort movie. A lot
Yeah.
of just the women and femmes that I know all love Possession. And I think that it speaks to this like almost like primal femininity to it
Yeah.
of just it's sort of like okay, like the one joke that the actress made in Hellraiser of like this is how far a woman will go for a really good dick. But
Yeah.
like it's like possession is like this is how far a woman will go for like freedom in like a real sense. And like even though like Sam Elliott's character Mark is like portrayed as becoming almost like violently sexist and like women are poisoning the world, his character the other characters in the film and the writing push back on that in a way that
Yeah.
feels earnest to me, even though the director was obviously going through shit with his ex. It does feel like he's kind of saying like, no, that's bullshit. Like it's not entirely shaming the narrative doesn't feel like it's entirely shaming Anna for what she's doing any more than it's shaming Mark. And it's just like it's such a primal like femininity as nature, femininity as creation, and it's screaming and throwing up on the subway and breaking shit and cutting yourself with a fucking electric knife just to like express the anguish. And it's just there's so much passion in this movie.
Yeah. The sorry, go on.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say that I think there is something that really appeals to that, in that like a lot of women and femmes and people in general are raised to be quiet and polite and not make a
Yeah.
stink. And Possession is the opposite of that. It's it's a loud, destructive movie. And I think whether you agree with what the characters are doing or not, there is something it's again, it's to quote a fucking meme. It's that like, don't you just want to go ape shit kind of thing? Like, don't you just want to throw shit and break stuff and go crazy? And that's what Possession is. I think it just speaks
Yeah,
to people.
100%. Yeah. I mean, I think it's like we were saying, like, what I kind of found striking is like Helen, who is like the doppelganger character, also played by a Johnny.
The
She
teacher,
is
right?
Bob's teacher.
Yeah.
I did have in my notes, like, there's some just bizarre stuff in the movie of like, you know, when your school teacher just walks in on you when you're in the bath and looks after you for a few minutes.
Yeah.
But yeah, she pushes back against Mark's kind of like women are kind of evil kind of trope. Or like you pointed out, like the association with nature. It's like that women are something that are uncontrollable or that are ungoverned, and he kind of suggests about like his thing of being saying like women. He's basically saying in a kind of like highfalutin way that like women are emotional. It's the same kind of shit that men say of like women are over emotional, women are
Uh-huh.
unstable, rather
Meanwhile,
than
he's
like
like in a rocking chair, like
in his
sweating
rocking
through his
cook chair.
shirt, staring off into the distance. Like,
The only thing she says in that moment that like seems turfy nowadays is she says the only thing that women have in common is menstruation, which is like
yeah.
completely, completely at the time was not what that meant. But when you watch it now,
No,
you're like, oh
it's one of
God.
those things that like I didn't take that to mean anything other than just the character saying that women don't just have all these things magically in common,
Yeah, of
which,
course.
you know.
But that's
Um,
basically the turf viewpoint.
well, and there's
Like,
another point too, kind of going back to the like, oh, women are over emotional thing. There's a point when Heinrich and Sam are having an argument, which by the way, we have to talk about like the homoerotic implications between Heinrich and Sam at some point too,
oh
because
yeah,
it's crazy.
100%. I don't think we have to address the question because I think it's pretty obvious that
Yeah,
like,
it's just something I love about this movie too.
yeah,
But he says at one point to Mark like, "Oh, you're just a woman, or you're being like a woman."
yeah,
And I just think that that's so interesting that both kind of primary male characters in the film have this shitty view toward women, while each of them are like falling over drunk and fighting each other and rolling around on the floor and throwing fits. Like,
yeah. I think in particular why, and I talked about this a bit with my friend Nico in the last episode, why I think the film speaks, and I think it speaks to the fact that as a woman, we deal with these hormonal things that it makes you, it's like, thing is like people don't take this out of context and think that I'm making some grand declarative statement. But at the same time, like being a woman makes you insane in a way that the world does not acknowledge. And I think one of the things about being a trans woman is that we learn we have like this much delayed second proper puberty, and we
mm,
learn that we have to deal with all this emotion, but also we can't express it. And that's, I think, part of why this movie has such an appeal for trans women. Now, I'm talking about trans women in particular in this instance because that's my experience.
mm.
But it is like you feel like you want to be like a Johnny screaming in the subway, being like, "What? Like, how can anyone pretend like this is normal?" And then but that I think that's why it speaks to a kind of like it's female emotion in the most extreme way, and that obviously is going to appeal to us.
Yeah, and yeah, it also makes me think of the scene where Anna's kind of torturing the girl in her dance class, where she says like, "Well, now she'll never say how talented she is without knowing how hard she has to work for it," basically, or like how difficult it actually is.
Hmm.
And, again, kind of speaking specifically as a trans woman, but also knowing that this is sort of a universal feminine experience, is like the act of being emotional while being constantly told that you shouldn't be. To be feminine is to
Exactly.
be quiet, to be polite, to be soft, like Helen in this movie, for instance.
Yeah.
And so it's a double-edged sword, and I think that's what kind of causes this madness, is it's just like, not only am I emotional, and do I want to express that emotion, but then I'm told that it is incorrect for me to do so
Yeah.
and impolite. And so therefore you just want to scream and throw your groceries around.
Anna and also like Johnny, the blue dress, she's just so cunty.
Ugh,
She's incredible.
iconic.
From the moment that she arrives, her eyes are just like, just light that I don't know where else you'd find in the universe, but like she's incredible. But I think the thing for Anna is that she is the struggle for her is trying to understand she doesn't know who she is. And I think that that level of disassociation many of us can relate to. But she's trying to define herself other than the box in which of wife and mother that Mark and other people want to see her in. At the same time, Heinrich is interested in her and claims to be like Heinrich is such like the absolute like over he's just like a woke fuck boy who
Hmm.
uses the kind of language of like sexual liberation and this kind of like cod religious kind of philosophy to kind of like argue for what he wants, and like ultimately he wants Anna because he sees her. He talks about wanting to liberate Anna, but then he practically, in the moment where he shows up at, the squalid apartment where she has the creature, he's like, it's time enough. Like, I'm the only one who's able to lay claim on you because I lay no claim on you. And he,
Hmm.
he talks about wanting to see, the raw, unprocessed version of Anna that is just truly natural. And then he's presented with it in the form of the creature, and he's freaked out because that's not really what he ever wanted. It's like
Yeah.
she is, but it is Madonna horror complex in that one person wants to put her into this Madonna box, one person wants to put her into the horror box, and the school teacher is like fucking trad wife dream of like very like traditional looking woman who is doing the nurturing school teacher job, who's of course great with Bob and great with kids, and is very like would fit into that return with a V coded kind of idea of what women should be. And Anna is trying to escape from that basically.
Yeah, and the whole theme of doppelgangers in this film of, Anna, I guess, essentially creating this idealized version of Mark, and Mark discovering this idealized version of Anna in the form of Helen. Like, but also both of these versions also being their own kind of potentially destructive force, especially with like the last shot in the film, you're kind of left wondering what Helen's deal is to begin with. But like, you know, there's something to be said for like wanting to be with somebody so badly and yet them being so terrible for you that you create this like delusion of a perfect version of them that is exactly what you want,
Yeah.
while also simultaneously like destroying each other. Like
Yeah.
all the argument scenes that they have and the throwing things and the hitting and like it's so raw.
Yeah.
Like mixed with these scenes of like weird horrible bliss with their other doubles. Like
Yeah, I wanted to speak to, the kind of camp aspect that we were talking
mhm.
about, if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, I
I think
just love how
it's a
heightened
funny
it
movie
is.
as well. Like the pink socks moment, like does our
Yeah.
target still wear pink socks? The that kind of it's got such a mash of tones in it. But continue, sorry.
No, I was just gonna say this film is a great example to me of the idea that like camp doesn't inherently have to mean funny.
Hmm.
Like this movie is undeniably camp. It's so elevated and so heightened, and like everyone's just screaming, and again, like rocking back and forth in the rocking chair, the scene when like Sam Elliott is in the bed and he's just like throwing
Sam
himself
Neill's.
over on his side a bunch of times. Like it's very camp, but in a way that is distressing rather than hilarious, like in a way that feels almost nightmarish. Yeah, everyone is just at 110% at all times. Everyone's eyes are huge and they're sweating and they're whispering intensely into each other's ear. And what about this? Well, I've considered this. Well, have you thought about this? And it's just like it's like it's like a domestic nightmare.
Mhm.
And I think that camp is something that horror in particular has this weird relationship with of like, a lot of times you'll hear something described as campy to mean bad, but I think in this case it's part of what makes this film so great is that it is this weird campy nightmare, but it never once feels silly. It just feels like, oh my God, what the fuck is wrong with these people? What's happening? What like
Mhm.
it's it makes me think of the descriptions of the movie Antichrist, Lars von Trier's Antichrist, which is just like this is a movie that takes place in hell. Like
Yeah.
everything is terrible and there's no escape for anyone. And I think the campiness really adds to that surrealistic horror.
It's definitely a film that you can compare with Antichrist because it feels like it's dealing with the same kind of subjects in terms of the discussions in it. It's this treatise about is woman evil, is nature evil. I am a huge admirer of Von Trier's work. I remember seeing that there was like a Q&A with him, and I'm like, there is no other filmmaker who I admire more, but who I would want to spend time in his company less.
That sums it
Uh,
up perfectly for me, yes.
yeah, exactly. And the one scene that I wanted to kind of ask you about what your interpretation of is because I don't know what my interpretation is we see the moment where Mark is undressing Anna and he kind of like pauses while having his hand around her
Love
rib,
that moment. Yeah.
which is incredible. Which is later mirrored in when he is undressing Bob, I think after he has wet himself.
So it's actually reversed. The scene with Bob happens first when he comes home and Bob is all
Oh yeah,
neglected and
yeah.
messy. And then the scene with Anna happens shortly after when she comes home.
Yeah.
Um,
What do you
to
think that
me,
means?
like, sorry.
I said, what do you think that means? Like, because
I
I
mean,
did,
not to sound cheesy, but I genuinely think to me that scene is like what this movie means by possession. He is trying to like physically, like it's like he's trying to wrap his hands all the way around them both and like
yeah,
have them and hold them and they're his. And like with Bob, there's a little bit of an implication of like he's worried that Bob is like malnourished or something like that, but there's still like
yeah,
it's not a tender gesture. It's a possessive gesture. It's a like, I want to hold on to you and keep you here. And he does it later with Anna. And again, it's the exact same mirrored shot. He wraps his hands around her torso, but he kind of hesitates and stops doing it. And he doesn't hold on the way that he does with Bob. And I think that it's the literal physical action and representation of what the whole movie is about, which is somebody trying desperately to cling to someone or something that is not theirs to cling to and
yeah,
will not stay with them. So to me, it's just like that to me is it's the possession of it all. It's his character, this kind of masculine, put together, like he's a literal spy. He's like
yeah.
suave and clean and cool, and his life is falling apart, and he's just trying to hold on to these two anchors to reality. That's how I saw it.
It's interesting that he says, when he's kind of like talking about laying down the law that he's going to leave Bob with Anna, he said at one point about restoring order, and I feel that he's going to restore order, and I feel that's very telling is that it's like he's going to restore order to like the nuclear family that he has just left her to maintain, and that he just expects that he can come back to, and that it will exist as the natural order is. And it's when you mentioned kind of his concerns about Bob being malnourished, or when he finds Bob is such a brilliant performance, it's so bizarre.
Oh
But
yeah.
but when he comes back and Bob has got like the jam over him and it's all messy, it's like that really is Anna rejecting like the matriarch. Well, matriarch films is your company, but the rejecting that is her rejecting the matriarch role because it's like she has broken the social contract of what like woman is to be by abandoning her child for long periods of time. Like
Yeah.
it's very much a thing of that she is transgressing. the expected roles for her. I wanted to kind of ask about was I feel like as are you are queer, you date women, or am I over?
I'm bisexual, polyamorous bisexual. I pretty much anybody who's attractive and interesting.
Fair stuff. I am on paper a bi plus lesbian, in practicality, mostly women and femmes as well. But then,
I consider myself sapphic in that like
yeah,
I kind of
exactly. That's it.
romanticize a sapphic love like a style of like romantic attraction, but physically I can be attracted to pretty much
Yeah,
anybody.
same. I have had partners that a partner that I called my boyfriend, BOI. I describe myself as a lesbian because as a trans woman, it's owning that label, and it
Yeah.
has been hugely helpful for me, and are a huge kind of like source of identification for me. More
I
as
do the same thing, and
that
I
sense,
used to consider myself lesbian. Now I honestly I lean more toward bisexual, just especially like with the current partners that I have. I want to be, make it clear
of
that
course.
they're not like some kind of exception to a rule.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
like, it's hard. Identity is fluid, which I think is part of the fun and shouldn't be a problem for
of
anybody. But
course. 100%. And while watching the film, I was kind of thinking about, do you feel like, I feel like I have to a certain extent, by virtue of my queerness, escaped any chance. And, this is also, could be seen as a negative, but I feel like my queerness affords me a certain distance from the patriarchal expectations put on women. I
hmm,
feel like my
interesting.
queerness means that by not dating cis men, I have somewhat escaped a lot of the patriarchal expectations put on women. It's not expected of me in the same way that I will be married to a man. It's not expected of me to have children, certainly not. I would fight for our rights to be able to do it, and certainly it's something that I think should exist as a possibility for us. But as a queer woman, it's not something that is likely to happen, nor do I want. I do
You know,
feel like I have a different relation to the societal expectations of women a little bit in that regard, because, like I say, I'm not fulfilling the kind of relationship expectations of a woman. That's a lot that
yeah.
I've said, but I
No, it's
wonder,
okay. I'm going to try to speak to that because I have a couple of different sort of conflicting thoughts on it.
as do
And
I. That's
also,
why.
and also, like I'm in America where right now trans people are dealing with all the shit America's doing. But like there is, like I know trans women who really do want to conform to traditional femininity. They want a
Same.
husband, they want kids, they want to be, the feminine matriarchal figure. And on the flip side, I know plenty of trans women like myself, like you, who are like, fuck all that. I'm what I want to be, and don't even ask me to explain it to you. I do think that while you can escape the societal expectation to conform to femininity, that does not mean that the patriarchal expectation is not still there in that. Like when you look at the trans women who are most accepted by mainstream society, they often do fit in. For the record, I'm not putting this like a blame on these trans women in particular. I'm talking about the
No,
patriarchy.
100%.
But when you look at the trans women who are the most accepted by society, by especially the patriarchy, it is often the ones who do go out of their way to, or just happen to fit the most into those labels of femininity. They've had bottom surgery, or at least people assume they have without actually asking, or they have a boyfriend or a husband, or like they're because I think to a lot of people, they want trans people around only when they can't tell, when it's hidden.
Mm,
So while I do think there's a lot of liberation in personally escaping or avoiding the tropes and expectations of the patriarchy, I do think that it's important to note that those expectations and pressures are still present. We have simply chosen to ignore them.
yeah.
But the patriarchy would still expect us to either, well, primarily they would just want us all to be men again. But, barring that, they would expect the other extreme. You must become a capital W woman the way that they would define a woman to be. And even then, they'll consider you
Yeah.
an outsider. But, now I'm just getting fully into politics. But like,
No, I mean,
you
it's
know,
gonna happen.
I do think that it's still there. It's just a matter of how you respond to it or how much attention you pay to it, I guess.
No, I think that's certainly true, and I would want to, I feel like this is something that it's so complicated, and I expect that everyone who takes the time to listen to a podcast is gonna have a good faith read of what I say, because it is so complex, and my attitude when it comes to any choice for trans people is that it is 100% everyone's choice, and that some of these decisions shouldn't be politicized, whether it's voice training, whether it's who we date, whether it's,
Oh yeah.
all of these
Trans
things.
people, trans women, trans men, non-binary people, that we're not a monolith any more than any other community is.
Of course not.
So this is just us riffing on our own interpretation of things, of course. But like,
Yeah, but we
it's
are
still
also like,
fascinating to talk about.
of course, yeah, and we are like two blue-haired trans women who love possession, and I'm
Yeah.
fairly certain you probably have a strong, a strong love of Firewalk with me as well.
Oh God,
Uh,
yes.
no, but what is I think it's like important to talk about, like when we talk about the kind of these kind of like the trans femme comfort film canon, like
Hmm.
I think possession, it is that feeling of it's also like Anna is, failing the expectations of gender from a cis perspective, and I think that's a huge part of why the film speaks to us as well. With Fire Walk with Me, it's just that like a lot of trans women at some point in your transition, you are going to feel like your life is Fire Walk with Me. You're gonna feel like it's apocalyptic, and you're gonna feel like you are you are
Yeah.
you are a girl who's going through it.
Well, and like I want to go back to like we talk about like trans femme comfort films. I really want to go back to the like women as nature thing.
Oh yeah.
Because I
Oh,
do think that like literally if you're a trans woman, you are self-made. You have reinvented yourself, recreated, reshaped yourself literally or figuratively
hmm
to best represent the version of yourself that you feel in your soul to the
hmm
outside world. It is an act of rebellion. It is an act of rejection of everything society has taught us. And you are now living as your true self, regardless of what anyone thinks. And so, with that does come this feeling of almost primal, like, I am woman, I am feminine. This is me. And so there is an attraction to these really intense women as forces of nature, women as destruction, women as chaos stories, because there's something unleashing, there's something freeing about that.
yeah.
And I think that's why so many trans femmes, as well as just like queer women or even cis women that have kind of rejected or been through some shit, we're all kind of drawn to this because it's us a little bit.
Yeah. 100%. When I think about like this is the kind of like baby dollification of serial killers that we've seen around true crime culture, which is predominantly consumed by women in the last decade. The kind of emergence of a true crime culture is definitely driven by women, I would say.
Hmm.
Women, of course, here being a wider word for all types that fit under that, or feel
Yeah.
comfortable under that banner. But I do think, like, thinking about, like, I think when it comes to, like I said, like the baby dollification, the thirsting for serial killers, I can see on the one hand how, that stuff should be called out and we should talk about the realities. But I also feel like women deal with the possibility of being murdered all the time. Maybe we should just
Mhm.
acknowledge that this is our fucked up response to that, is to like, heaven forbid women have crushes. Like, maybe just
I
allow
mean,
people the fact that they have their own response to things.
part of what makes horror fun and part of what draws me to it in particular, because like you've seen two of my films now, but like I tend to lean into the kind of extreme erotic style of horror. And it is that like we are drawn to the taboo. We are drawn to danger. We are drawn, and we as in society, as in women, as in everyone, because especially living in a very constrictive, patriarchal, Christian-esque world, we're constantly told what's bad for us.
Hmm.
So eventually, if you're told enough times, don't press that red button, it's bad for you, you're gonna start looking at the red button and fantasizing about what would happen if you did press it. Even if you never do, you're gonna wonder what would happen if you
Yeah.
did. And that's all it is. It's just, it's not that anyone actually wants to have these terrible things happen to them. They don't. But it's fun to allow your brain to play about it because it's going to anyway.
Yeah,
So you may as
100%.
well allow yourself the fantasy and allow yourself to just explore the what ifs and the kind of darker side of things because we can't help what our brains focus on regardless.
Yeah, 100%. And I can say myself, as someone who walked through the world for a long time, living essentially as a man, albeit a strange version of one who didn't fit in.
Relatable.
You feel when you start to transition, you realize I never realized the privilege that I had, or the feeling of safety that I had,
Yes.
of not being constantly aware all the time. And now I live with that all the time.
Mhm.
And that is, something that you have to listen, a voice that you have to listen to, but also not overindulge. And I think that work that deals with, the most violent worst case scenarios can be cathartic in that it, like you said, it voices that part of your brain that is going to think about that anyway.
Yeah, playing with and romanticizing and engaging with the horrors takes a little bit of power away from the horrors and puts a
Yeah.
little of it in your own mind. Because like yeah, like I was never afraid to use a public bathroom before,
Yeah.
and now I am. Like it's just like it's so you've got to take these things that and let yourself have a little bit of control over them. And a lot of times the easiest way to do that is through fantasy, through story, through art. So that's what we do.
So let's talk about Mark and Heinrich. First of
Mm.
all, I don't think it's up for debate that Heinrich has definitely sampled the transsexual as a
I don't think it's up for debate that Heinrich has sampled everyone.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and I will say, I do okay. This movie does have a little queer undercurrent to it because Heinrich is very clearly queer coded, but also the two detectives it's revealed are
yes, yeah,
are in a
absolutely,
relationship and living together, which is just interesting to me.
yes,
And there's a line that Heinrich says, I forgot to write it down, but it's to Sam Elliott's character of like it's people like you, or it's thinking
Sam
like
Neill.
I'm sorry, Sam Neill's character.
We
Um,
mentioned Sam Elliott earlier, so I think I just got lost
God
in
damn it.
there.
Yeah, there's too many Sams. I'm so bad with names.
Possession
Every
with
time
Sam
I've said
Elliott.
Sam Elliott, know that I meant Sam Neill.
Sam
Whatever.
Possession with Sam Elliott would be something.
Possession with Sam Elliott would be a very different movie. Possession with Sam Neill is excellent. Forgive me. But when Heinrich says something to Mark, it's something like it's people like you that led us to the camps or to the gas chambers or something like that. It's a throwaway line, but it's really direct reference to the Holocaust.
Yeah.
And all I can think is like it, especially for queer people, especially in Germany in that era, that would have been very recent history. Like, and again, it goes into the fact that kind of everyone in this movie is in some way an immigrant or marginalized or outside of the norm.
Yeah.
So I don't know, like the queer coding is it's fun to sort of watch this really weird, flirtatious, violent relationship between these two men, but I also think it is deliberate and kind of
Yeah,
poignant.
I think that some of it is the kind of intimacy that exists where Heinrich is, both fighting but also kind of like rubbing his shoulders. I think it's another kind of example of like how the film is about bodies and how bodies interact and kind of the tactile nature of that. Because there's so much to talk about in this film and we are just scraping the surface, but and I'm sure most people are aware, but obviously there's the aspect of the film. It mirrors splitting not just between the doppelgangers, but the fact that this was shot in West Berlin pre-fall of the wall with they had special collaboration with the West German government. But like when you see the border guards guns from Mark's apartment, like those are the real border guards
Yeah,
in East
when they're
Berlin.
looking at the through the binoculars up at the camera, that's just like a
Yeah.
real thing. Like,
It was kind of shot in Kreuzberg, which is like a very all shot around that area, which is like was a heavily Turkish area. There's a reference, that one of the detectives says something like racist about a Turkish woman who when he's saying that, there was a broken window and some glass fell down.
mhm.
But it kind of emphasizes that coldness and the lack of feeling kind of moored to where you are is 100% part of that. But it's also like it is an immigrant story in as much as it's also that it was the place that Zalewski was at in terms of while he was making it. Did you know that there was originally that Anna's ex-husband was a character in the movie?
I did not know that. No.
So originally, Anna had an older like academic guy who was her ex-husband. But it was literally a case of like the script was rewritten whilst they had arrived in Berlin to they realized that it wasn't going to work with this character. But it's fascinating the stuff that didn't make it into the film. I mean, Sam Neill still won't talk about this film. It seems like it was quite a involving process.
Yeah, he has said it was his favorite movie he's ever been in, which is interesting. But
That is interesting two
yeah,
things, yeah. And I mean, also like the creature, which is incredible, like just, tentacle
every time
fucking.
I rewatch this movie when it's been a couple of years, I always forget how like genuinely frightening the creature looks when you first see it. It's like
So gross. It's
it's scary as
incredible.
hell. The little beady eyes that are blinking, like, it looks really good.
Oh, it's
Like,
incredible. And that was designed by Carlo Rambaldi, but basically it was transported to Berlin and it's from what I've heard, it was like with the creature, they kind of just got this creature in different pieces and then
mhm.
like had to kind of on the fly figure out how they were going to operate it and like puppeteer it. And with that in mind, like it looks incredible. I mean, one thing that I haven't mentioned, we hadn't kind of previously mentioned is just like the camera work is just like this continue like the scene where Mark meets his superiors or his employers and the camera is
Mm.
just tilting the whole time around the scene. It's like
In that huge room, the
yeah,
like
and it's also like there's so much space in it that is like massive, but also like has a kind of liminal feel to it where it's like the city is huge, but you barely see people in it, and it has that unlived in feel that is really, really striking.
well, and like almost everything in this movie, except things in the old apartment where the creature is shades of like gray and blue for the most
Mm,
part. Except Heinrich's apartment has some color and the creature's lair has some color. But it's very deliberately like washed in a way that just makes everything feel again, it adds to the dreaminess, but also the kind of vaguely apocalyptic feel of it all that like everything's bluish and gray and washed out and tired. Like,
can I ask, in terms of the Savages,
mm.
is your background like were you raised Christian? Is that kind of part of your kind of like your mood board, your trauma board in terms of like the
Yeah,
things that inform
I
your work?
I don't really have a lot of what I would classify as like religious trauma. Like I originally was raised Catholic, and then at a certain point in my life, I had to convert to Lutheranism, to specifically Missouri Synod Lutheranism, which is like a very conservative brand of Lutheran. And so I sort of saw at a very young age with Catholicism, and then as a little bit older with a Lutheran church, the sort of double-sided coin of like mainstream Christianity. And I'm saying this in a very, very personal, small lens,
Hmm.
but you know, I I am not a religious person now. You can probably guess from seeing the salvages, but I am still very fascinated by religion, and particularly I'm just very fascinated by how we as humans sort of interpret and try to reckon with and communicate with like the universe and like the unknown.
Yeah,
So religion to me is more of a tool to explore the kind of bigger ideas of like cosmic horror or like universal consciousness or whatever you want to call it. The idea that there's
yeah,
things out there that are bigger than us that know about us that are don't care about us. But also, again, living in Iowa, very, very Christian, very religious state. So I'm sort of surrounded by the trappings of Christianity, and so it's inspiring to me. But yeah, it's more of an aesthetic I like to play in than something that I consider to be really integral. But I use it more as a way to contrast like the horrors of an uncaring universe or uncaring immense power with the belief in something that loves us and cares about us and takes care of
yeah,
us.
100%.
And I am interested in how God is referred to because God is brought up a lot in Possession.
To me,
Um,
there's nothing to fear but God. To me, God is a kind of disease. Yeah.
yeah. And, I don't think that it's necessarily a religious thing as much as, again, kind of going back to that nature element of it all, of like how they each view what a creator must be in order to have created the world that they live in. But I do find it fascinating.
There's also just before Anna descends into the subway and we have the most iconic few minutes in horror performance. I think she is in a church looking at the crucifix and looking
Hmm.
at the face of Jesus.
I actually have something I literally just noticed it for the first time today watching it, but it's relevant. When she has the miscarriage in the subway, she says that like that was Sister Faith and now I'm left with Sister Chance, so I must care for my faith. Is the implication that she didn't have a miscarriage, but she gave birth to that creature in the subway? Is that where it came from? Because if it is, there is sort of a virgin birth, almost antichrist feel to it. That this
Yes.
thing, yeah, like because the ending, God, one shot in this movie that always sticks out to me is when the kid's going, don't open it," and you see the doppelganger standing out the door, like wiggling
Yeah.
his fingers, and I'm just like, he looks like the devil. It's terrifying, and there is sort of this like vaguely miraculous birth antichrist feel to it all that I like a lot. But this was the first time I watched it and thought, oh my God, she literally did give birth to this thing. Like,
Yeah, I definitely think that that's potential kind of interpretation. The other aspect that I've kind of like, the more I've watched, I'm kind of putting it together is the German woman who is screaming outside the apartment after it's exploded. Is that
mhm.
Heinrich's mother? She mentions later on going to the building, but there was just a hole and smoke and the police wouldn't let her near.
I don't know.
See?
That's a great question. It didn't even occur to me that that might be her.
She's incredible.
Yeah, I love that moment because at
Oh,
first,
it's
like,
incredible.
you always kind of think in a weird way, even though it's a totally different voice, I always think it's Sam Neill at first. That he's like cackling, running out of this building after blowing it up, and then you realize it's this random woman like waving things around on the side of the street. But it's a great, yeah, I don't know.
That explosion as well, it's just like when you're watching it, you're like, I did not expect there to be an explosion in a film like this. This was not.
No,
Have you watched a lot of kind of Zulewski's other work? Because I have to confess, as
I have
much as
not.
I, sorry?
I have not, admittedly, no.
Nor have I. One of my girlfriends really wants to check out Silver Globe, and it sounds fascinating. What's interesting is Zulawski talks about Silver Globe being like a Trojan horse of allowing using science fiction as the Trojan horse to talk about, the politics of his country. And Possession was the Trojan horse to talk about his divorce, these feelings of being in exile from his own country, and I suppose what his identity there's a great documentary on the second site box where it's like it was an episode of some French TV show because he ended up working in France primarily in his films afterwards, but it's like him talking about his identity as a Polish emigre or as a Polish exile, and him talking about, well, what does my identity mean as someone who is Polish but the country that I'm from rejects me. And I think that is very much a queer experience as well, of like how
Mhm.
I am lucky enough that, we have better laws for trans people than the UK does. But there certainly is that moment of, we have seen in Ireland, unfortunately, a rise of kind of like populist nationalism like everywhere else in the world. And it's
Mhm.
like when I see these people out with, like, you can tell if a protest is like bad vibes here if you see loads of Irish flags but no Palestinian flags.
Uh-huh.
And when I see that, it's like the Ireland that they talk about is an Ireland that doesn't exist, never really did. And I'm like, well, I'm not part of that Ireland that they want. I'm not part of this idealization of the country. I think like that is I think queer people can relate to as well.
Yeah, and obviously, again, this goes without saying, but isolation is such a huge part of possession. I mean, it literally the Berlin Wall, but also the separation of this couple, like when they have the argument in the diner and they're sitting next to each other with
Next
these
to each
little
other at
with a little
different
wall between
tables.
them, and even again the separation between characters like Mark and Heinrich, with Heinrich being kind of this perfect idealized, sexually open person, and Mark being this very clean, fastidious kind of control freak character, you know, that everyone in this movie is experiencing some kind of isolation or loneliness, and while also just dealing with people that they just fucking hate. And I do think that yeah, that certainly speaks to queer people. That speaks to anybody sort of on the margins right now of
Yeah.
just being simultaneously lonely and also not lonely and also surrounded by hostility. Like it's just a weird, surreal time for a weird, surreal movie. Um,
Do you think that's why the movie has kind of like risen in estimation in the last few years? Oh, by the way, have you seen what there's a I've not watched the whole thing, but there's a feature on one of the discs where it does a comparison between scenes from the cut that we love and the original American edit that went out when it was released on VHS. And have you seen those comparisons?
I have not. No, that sounds really entertaining though.
Look how they massacred my boy. Look how they
Oh
massacred my girl.
God, the
Like,
MPAA, the
dear
fucking
God, they cut so much out of it. The scene where Mark gets the phone call, which we must presume is from the entity because it's Anna says that she didn't call him.
hmm
They completely change the dialogue. They add these fucking weird solarization effects to loads of the sex scenes. They add these creepy, generic, spooky music. It was literally just like, it felt like someone bought the film based on the title Possession, went, oh, this isn't about demons. And then, like, just went in and did, like, because it is a horror film, but made, like, the most obvious rote horror film version out of the foot. It's a different movie made from the
That's
same footage.
fascinating.
Yeah, it's terrible, but for years the legacy of this movie is that a lot of people hadn't seen the true version of the movie, and it has risen in the last few years, and I feel like that is because we are reacting in this moment to an insane world. And I mean, is there anything else you want to say on Possession before I kind of bring to wrapping up?
Trying to think. I know for a fact that when I do eventually listen to this, I'm going to be constantly thinking of things I should have said or thought of, as always. But I don't think there's anything else really right now other than just that I think it's a brilliant film that people really should watch. I think it's a good gateway film into extreme cinema because like it
Yeah,
is
definitely.
crazy, but it's not like so over the top that I think people won't be able to watch it. And I think it's an important movie. I just think it's such a singular work of art, and everyone should watch it for themselves. That's my opinion.
100%. I think what you said and what is key to me is like I am so used to watching films that are just like easily digestible, have it's very clear what this is, and you watch it and like you enjoy it or you don't, but that's the relationship that you have to it. And with Possession, my relation to it has changed so much the numerous times I watch it, and I still struggle to say everything that I think about this film. Like I preface talking about this, but like this is not my definitive take on Possession. But that's what's so exciting, I think, in a world of, the mainstream media is pushing stuff that is just digestible to the most basic common denominator. We were writing stuff for people who are two screening, so we have to repeat things all the time so that people don't miss the important details. And it's like, and even in terms of, discourse when people don't want characters that are hard to digest or don't want material that is thorny and has elements that are thorny and difficult to unpack is like the dominant mode that a lot of people want is something that's just easily digestible, and Possession is far from that. And
Yeah.
that's what I think keeps it still like it's still exciting to me in much the same way that Best of Both Worlds was still exciting to me after two views, whereas a lot of films are only exciting to me until I watch.
Yeah, I would always encourage people not only like watch fucked up movies and watch extreme cinema, but like watch art that makes you think, watch things that are hard to digest, watch things that you're gonna have to watch a couple of times to really get it or that you're never gonna get, but it's still worth watching. I think it's so important that we continue to flex our critical thinking and creative muscles and don't just like I'm not saying there's anything wrong with going to see a popcorn movie and just enjoying a movie where you can shut off your brain and have a good time. I have my own vices when it comes to things like that, but it's so important, especially right now, to engage with difficult and dense art because otherwise, if you don't use those muscles, you do lose them.
Yeah,
So,
well, thank you so much. I wanted to say I screenshot it earlier, but I can't remember the exact wording. But Bleeders ends with you saying what is it that the last kind of piece of
oh
text
God,
on it?
I can read it. Hold on. In a world sick with hatred, love is punk. Protect trans lives, free Palestine, fuck ICE.
I can't say it better than that. Thank you so much, Carson T. Morrissey. I will include links to, well, most of your films aren't viewable right now, but your novel is purchasable.
hmm And
If
if you
there's
link to
any,
my Vimeo and my social media accounts, I will be uploading some things in the near future too that'll be viewable, and hopefully Bleeders will be coming to a screen nearish people soon. So we'll
okay,
see.
well, I mean, we'll look into tight and we'll talk about trying to get screenings over here and
Yeah, it's a little early yet, but I do want to say that for the first time ever, I'm pretty close to having an actual little distribution thing with Bleeders and a couple other films.
oh, amazing,
So I
awesome.
don't want to put the cart too ahead of the horse, but some of my work should be becoming a lot more accessible really soon. So
Hell
it'll be
yeah.
cool.
I think that there is like rightfully a trans femme genre canon right now that exists with
Yeah.
Vera Drew and Louise and Jane Shambram and Alice, Dylan Mars Greenberg as well.
hmm
But my point being that I think that there are people like yourself and Dylan Mars Greenberg who haven't been discovered as much yet, and I think that it's important that we, elevate these other voices as well. Not take away from all those filmmakers who I love. I literally have castration movie poster on the
Oh
wall.
yeah, no, like I said, I would never even dream of comparing myself to somebody like that. But I will say that, hopefully 5, 10 years down the line, you never know what's gonna happen, and I'm just gonna keep making stuff forever because I can't help myself. So
Hell yeah.
hopefully it continues to find its audience and speak to people, and whether it's a theater with 10 people in it or 100 people in it, it's a great time. So that's all that matters to
Hell
me, is
yeah.
that people see it and love it or hate it
Amazing.
and talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you so much.